Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Independent Activist with me, Fra Hughes, in Belfast. I'm delighted and honoured and pleased to have Maire McNally join us today. Maire is a member of BDS Belfast, an excellent local activist group. Maire, we first met, I was just thinking back on things 15 years ago. I just come back from a convoy in Gaza, and you were hosting a weekend in memory of your father, and David Rovics was singing up in a club, I think it was the Roddies in West Belfast. So we've known each other for 15 years, and we were together on the Global March to Gaza in June 2025. And so do you want to tell people a bit of your history, who you are, a bit of your background, and then we'll get into the story of BDS?
Okay. Well, I'm 75 years old. I'm mother of 7 and grandmother of 12. I've been a political activist all my life. When I was very young, when I was 17, I was always marching for, support of Black civil rights at the time. And then I was anti-war for the Vietnam War. And then I joined the civil rights movement. So I was a member of the Irish civil rights movement, which very much based itself on the civil rights movement through Martin Luther King, because we seen a lot of the Jim Crow laws that were happening in America. They were very similar to laws that were happening in Ireland. We had the Special Powers Act. So, and then my father, he was interned. Internment without trial is the same as administrative detention. You're arrested, no trial, no jury, no political representation, no determination of sentence. So marched against internment when I was a lot younger. My husband was in jail, my father was in jail. I'd been under arrest, and then I've just been a political activist all my life. Every time I think something is so unjust, you can't just sit and shout at the television. You can't just sit and say how terrible it is and not do anything. It's not my nature. And I come from a family of rebels, a family of Irish Republicans, and a family of Irish activists, going right back to the 1798 rebellion in Ireland, believe it or not. My great uncles were fighting for land rights in the 19th century. They were land leaguers, they were young Irelanders, and they're on the very first Republican plot. My grandmother was a Connollyite. My own mother was an active Irish Republican. She was on hunger strike during the 1940s. My father was in jail in the 1940s. He was in the Crumlin, escaped from the Crumlin, and ended up being interned in the South. And when my daddy was in the jail in the Curragh, there was a lot of people in it. And if you don't know the history of Ireland, because of Ireland's neutrality and the IRA had a bombing campaign, the Irish government arrested and put Irish Republicans in jail. But they also arrested a lot of communists, socialists, anyone who was anti-government were all arrested. So my father went into sort of a university of knowledge. He was only 19, very inquisitive, very intelligent. And he listened to the communists, he listened to the socialists, he listened to the men coming back from the Spanish Civil War. But that was during the war. My father took a real keen interest in Israel, in the establishment of Israel and the dispossession of the Palestinian people. He's seen it very, very similar to what was happening in Ireland. And so I was brought up with a background of politicalization, a background of getting to know the world around me and realizing how countries outside the world affect my living conditions. And so that's just part of who I am, what I grew up with.
That's an amazing, yeah, absolutely. What an amazing story. I mean, people think about, my kind of first interactions with Palestine would have been around 1982 when they moved from the Zionists, moved all the way up to Beirut. And then the American warships evacuated the PLO out of Beirut. And I remember thinking, what's the PLO doing in Lebanon? Like, why aren't they in Palestine? And I remember the massacres at the Shabra and Shatia camps. So they got all the people, all the armed men to leave the refugee camps, and then they went in and murdered practically every man, woman, and child over 3 days in the camps. That was my first memories of Palestine, and it was a year after the hunger strikes. And here you are telling us a story that your father was interested in Palestine at the very foundations of this terrorist state in 1948. That is impressive, that pedigree and that lineage. So you've been an activist all your life. It's in your DNA. It's who you are. And we're all very proud of that, I have to say. So let's go on to BDS Belfast. Why does it exist? What does it do? What has it done? And what do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, just had to add one more thing. My mother and father came out of jail. They were blacklisted because they'd been treasonous during the Second World War, because, you know, they'd been taking a bombing campaign to England when it was at war, etc., etc. So we lived in England, and my father's first friends were Jamaicans who had actually come over after the war for work. And I remember my daddy telling me a story one time when he was in work about some man had said to him, "Hey, Eddie, what would you do if one of your wee girls married a black man?" And this man had been boasting about how he battered his wife and, you know, how he was with other women and that. And my daddy said, "If my daughter married a good man, I wouldn't care what colour, what religion, or what he looked like, as long as he was a good man." And I remember my dad saying that, but I also remember him having Israeli friends and having a Palestinian people in the house who were displaced, just displaced people from the war. So they were in our house when I was very young, and I didn't understand what was said, but it made me interested afterwards, because my father wanted to know. He wanted to know who people were, what they thought, what they were doing, why they were there, and everything else. So I think that Jamaican is my brother's godfather, and he came over with the Windrush. So that's the kind of home that I was coming from. I didn't have any option but to be political. But no, see, what's during the troubles, and I was very involved all during the troubles. We had Palestinians that come over. You know, I was wearing a PLO. I was wearing a keffiyeh. I was wearing a keffiyeh during the hunger strike marches. You know, when people weren't actually, where a lot of people weren't making the link between us and Palestine. I'd already made that link, and my father had already made that link long before that. So we were always aware and doing bits and pieces, which, you know, I'd rather go behind, you know, just keep it on the QT if I do anything. But no, my daddy was very good from all directions. It could talk about absolutely any bad politics in any part of the world. You know, I remember him talking about Yomo Kenyatta and the Mau Mau uprising, and still, is that something I haven't brought myself up to speed on what's happening in Africa at the minute, because I know it's horrendous. There's horrendous things going on there at the minute, but my daddy would have been up to speed on everything. I probably would have had to go in and ask him what's happening here and what's happening there, because that's the person he was. But on to BDS, I obviously was aware of what was happening in Palestine, but I just happened to go into Lidl, and Yaz and Owen were doing the protests with a lot of people that I kind of recognised. And I just said, "What's happening here?" And they said, "We take it, made Israeli goods off the shelves." And I says, "God, I'll help you." So I went and joined in their protest. And then Yaz handed me a loudspeaker and asked me to make a speech. So whenever we came out, Yaz says, "Maire, you're very good at public speaking." I'd never done it before in my life. Nobody ever given me a mic before. But I just made a small speech, and then they asked me would I join. So I just started. That's how I joined. I just said, "Well, I'm not sure I can do Saturdays and Sundays, but I babysit through the week, so I wouldn't make a commitment through the week, but we'll make it full time." So every Saturday and Sunday I turned up, and every so often it's my turn to speechify, but it's a good group of people. Everybody's very good at speaking. Everybody's good at putting the point across. Everybody's up, always knows exactly what's happening in Palestine and can repeat it for people who don't know, won't know, don't want to know. We would say, "This is happening today. This is what's happening in the West Bank." You know, so Damien, Patrick, everybody who's in BDS all know what they're talking about, and we can make speeches that nobody can say it's not true. They can attack us personally, can attack us on our looks, they can attack us on everything. They can't attack us on what we say, because we know everything that we say is 100% true. So I've been with BDS. We don't only remove goods from the shelves, we're active in other ways. We have already picketed at Texaco, and there's a big campaign going on now about Texaco. But we've taken over banks, we've taken over the BBC, we've protested outside the BBC. Every so often we'd have a day of action where we go from one university to another, in and out of all the shops, in and out of all the banks. So we have numerous days of actions as well. So to keep Palestine in the forefront of people's minds, that's what we do.
BDS Belfast is without a doubt one of the strongest advocates for Palestine. I'm very proud of everything that BDS does. And I'm so proud that any opportunity I get speaking to people, because sometimes I get interviewed, get invited to London, I always mention BDS Belfast, because you're out every day, you're committed activists. It's a kind of community-led group from me, from the outside, collective decisions, no leadership, no hierarchy. People come together with a common purpose and a common cause. And I think what you do is fantastic. And I know you've occupied Belfast City Hall at one stage, so well done for that. So BDS goes out twice a day, or did twice a day, every day, and removes these Israeli products.
No, now we do it once a day, because Lidl have stopped selling Israeli goods. Asda in West Belfast, the staff there won't handle Israeli goods. B&M don't handle Israeli goods. So we're down to 3 shops now. So we have a rota, and our rota, it depends on how many actions and what actions we do according to the rota. So today it would be 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, right through to 6. And the most people put their names down for that particular action, that's when the action takes place. So if 3 people put up for 11, 3 people's there at 11. If 4 put up for 4 in the afternoon, then that's when the action is.
Very good. So why is BDS important?
I think it's important. It's important in a lot of ways. First of all, for people who are not activists but that support Palestine, they always would come up. And when we do our actions, we would maybe get 10% of people who'd be negative and 90% of people who's positive. People will come up and ask us, what do I boycott? And boycotting has been a request from the Palestinian people. They have asked for the boycott movement. The boycott movement originated with the Palestinian people to do as much economic damage as we can, and also to make the 3 words "made in Israel" toxic. That if it said "made in Israel," that people know what the Israelis are doing on the Palestinians, and if they see "made in Israel," they're going to put it back on the shelves. But the boycott movement with goods, yeah, we know that a lot of companies have gone out of business because of boycott. We know a lot of companies have had a massive fall in profits. We know a lot of cafes, restaurants, the like of McDonald's, have had a very loss in footfall. So there is economic benefits from actually boycotting goods that are made in Israel, because we know they're all, and we keep repeating it, these come from stolen Palestinian territory. We know what's happening in Ashdod. We know that the wipes that they make for example, in Home Bargains, we know they're made on a kibbutz. That kibbutz was created by Czech Zionists, Hungarian Zionists, and the people that live there have long gone. They've been moved. Their village was moved 1948, and where all the goods that are made in Home Bargains are from a factory built in that particular kibbutz. So we know exactly where it came from and the history behind the land that it's built on. And we make that quite clear. This is made This is manufactured on land stolen from the Palestinian people on a village that no longer exists, and the Palestinian people have been dispersed across the Arab world. That is what's happening. If you're buying fruit and vegetables, water is being diverted for these fruit, and water is being rationed to the Palestinian people. We make that very, very clear. So we keep saying it, because we keep saying it, people will listen. And that's the boycott in itself. The divestment is a big one, because nearly every company invests in Israel. And it gives legitimacy, even if it doesn't. It hopefully there is an economic downturn on the Israeli people. Hopefully economically there is damage done. But as well as that, it's actually sidelining, it's isolating Israel, it's making Israel toxic, in that we don't want to put our money into this, right? And it raises that profile of, where should money be invested? Where's the best way to invest money? If you've money to invest, and the sanctions would be brilliant if every company, every country in Europe sanctioned Israeli goods. That would cause massive, massive economic damage. And it will be a moral damage as well as an economic damage. It will be a moral damage as well, that millions of people won't buy your goods because of what you're doing. So there is an economic damage done to Israel. There's a profile of what's happening in Palestine is another benefit. And the other one is the actual moral outrage of people who refuse to buy their goods.
Absolutely. I think BDS is a win-win all round. Not only are you highlighting the injustices being visited upon the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, and now historic Palestine as well, you're raising awareness. So you're educating people when you tell them why you're taking the products off the shelves, what companies are involved in that, how complicit they are through their engagement with the greater Israeli economy. When it comes to sanctions, I was in Brussels when they were doing the EU trade deal, and I believe just in the last few days, the Norwegians potentially have said that they want to end the preferential deal between the EU and Israel. So that's another step forward. So apart and aside from BDS, so I understand your personal and also your family connection with the cause for liberation and the cause for justice with dignity for the Palestinian people. Uh, do you want to go in a tiny wee bit more into maybe the parallels between Ireland or your own personal kind of, why you feel so deeply that we should bring justice to West Asia? It's not just Palestine. There's Syria, there's Iraq, there's Yemen, there's Iran. Yeah, that's what I want to ask. Why personally is it so important to you to try and bring peace with dignity and justice, not just for Palestine, I would suggest, but for the people of the region?
Do you know, I like to travel, and I think that this planet we live on is absolutely beautiful. And you go to countries and you see people who are beautiful, their children are lovely. Even in poverty, children can find somewhere to laugh and find joy out of life. They can. And it is a beautiful world. And this world is not overpopulated. There's enough food, there's enough everything for every man, woman, and child to have a good life, a happy life, a decent life, and a life where they can look forward to a future. But everything in this world at the minute seems to be in the hands of greedy, evil, cruel, brutal people. Like trillions and billions of dollars, half the world is in the hands of a tiny minority. And because of that, and to keep that control, all that money is used for wars to keep people at each other's throats so that they can get more money. It's have one nation fighting against the other, cause nations fighting amongst themselves in Syria, cause nations fighting amongst themselves in Libya. They'll do the same with the Palestinian people. They'll have the Palestinian people at each other's throats so that they can keep them divided and never united. And all of that is for more money and more profit for very few people. And it's not the world that I want for my children, and it's not the world I want for my grandchildren. I would like to see, not only for my children and my grandchildren, I want it for every child that's born into this world to have food, to have clothing, to have education, and to have the chance of growing up as a child into an adult with a future and a good future. And if we just learn to not be greedy, not be selfish, and to keep fighting to create a better world everywhere, that's what I keep fighting for. And I know some people, I think there's Patrick Pearse. Do you ever hear Patrick Pearse's poem, The Fool?
No, go ahead.
No, it has what if the dream come true? What if the dream come true? And millions unborn will dwell in the house of my heart, the noble house of my thought. I've squandered my soul, I've squandered my life on the truth of this dreadful dream. So Patrick Pearse said it better than I did, dream of a better world, hope for a better world, talk about a better world, fight for a better world. And that's the only thing individuals can do. That's my philosophy, Fra.
It's a very beautiful vision. I wish more people would take it on board. Yeah, well, you're touching on everything that is at the core roots of the instability, the violence, the wars, the deaths, the massacres, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing in West Asia, which is colonial imperialism and capitalism. That's the three legs upon which the inhumanity and the inequality and the discrimination and racism and fascism is built. It's the altar of greed that causes young kids to go to bed hungry, causes people to die unnecessarily. They can't get medicine, they can't get adequate health, can't get clean drinking water. Uh, yeah, that's all. I don't know if there's a wee echo there, or maybe somebody was phoning you, were they?
No, no, my son-in-law was phoning in there.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Well, look, let's get on to. I know you've been very active, right? And I know you've come to uh, get involved in more direct action now without saying anything that's going to get you into any difficulties. I believe you had a visit from the police recently. They called to your door. I've seen a wee video out there, 250,000 views.
500,000, half a
Wow.
million, half a
Half a million.
million on half a million on Instagram and 210,000 on Facebook. Oh my
It's
God,
amazing.
that
That's
copy
raising
must go.
that's
Do you
raising
know
the
what? I
awareness.
reckon that the police are going to start playing rock, paper, scissors whenever my name comes up for a visit.
I'm sure
But
they're going to call into your door.
no, I support what Palestinian Action do. I'm just totally outraged that it was designated as a terrorist organization, because the very definition of terrorism is to terrorize somebody, and Palestine Action have not terrorized anyone. They destroy weapons of war. They go in and damage components of weapons. They go in and spray paint airplanes, but they have never threatened the nation. They've never threatened national stability. They've never threatened individuals. And the very definition of terrorism is to terrorize somebody. So there's no reason for it. And I wore Palestinian Action because if I lived in England, I would probably be inside with them. So yes, anything to stop the war machine and do everything. So I've made it quite clear. So I have, I think I've had now 7 cautions, and I was arrested for wearing a Palestine Action T-shirt under that section. So all the cautions, everything is all now with the Public Prosecution Service, and that is the actual terrorism charge, the blocking the roads. Oh, what have I done? Oh, yes, I'm an obstructive sitter. Wearing a t-shirt. I've done obstruction sitting. I've blocked roads. I have wore a t-shirt. So I'm a terrorist.
I had the pleasure of actually interviewing Brogan Devlin. She is the sister of Jordan Devlin. He's one of the original Filton 18. It's now Filton 24, Filton 25. I believe 5 of them are now on hunger strike. They seem to be mirroring the 1981 hunger strike. One comes on, then it's 4 or 5 days later before the second one comes on, then another 4 or 5 or 7 days later before the third one comes on. And I interviewed last week a girl called Sarah from the SOAS 2. She made a public speech and she put something on social media. This is what she's accused of, which was in support of the Palestinian resistance. She's charged under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act, and she's facing something up to 14 years in prison. So do you think that the law is being applied impartially, or do you maybe have a view that the law is being used to try and prevent people raising awareness around Palestine, when we consider other BDS members of Belfast have been charged and brought before the courts for BDS actions in Sainsbury's in West Belfast? They put stickers, stickers onto products, and then they were charged with vandalism. But I believe the charge against at least one of the BDS members, Marty, has been dismissed. So do you think it's a crackdown on lawful protest? And do you think that the law is being used to prevent
Absolutely. But over in
displays?
England, they're coming very, very heavy. Sorry, I was talking over you there. No, over in England, they've become very, very heavy on people. But we know that things are different here in the northern part of Ireland. Now, there's a judicial review, I'm sure you're aware, coming up for the actual law itself. They're actually taking a judicial review on the law. I'm also taking a judicial review from here, which will be in the papers shortly. It'll be announced shortly, but there is a judicial review on its way. But here's the rub, right? First of all, our rights are guaranteed. Free speech, human rights, all of these. Now, human rights law, I'm quite aware. Some human rights are absolute and some are qualified, which means public safety, national interests, they're qualified. Some are absolute, like the right to life. Okay, but I'm aware of that. But all human rights law in England is connected to the membership of the European Union. Britain no longer is a member of the European Union and not European Union citizens, therefore not answerable to the European Court of Human Rights. Okay, but we are European Union citizens. So we have recourse to the European Court of Human Rights. Now, Britain's also a member of the Council of Europe, so their connection, it's very, very complicated, but they are part of the Council of Europe and therefore signatories to the human rights law, but they are no longer to the European Union. We are European Union members, first of all, and we have also them rights guaranteed as European Union members. We have them rights guaranteed as British citizens. We have them rights guaranteed under the Good Friday Agreement. So under the Good Friday Agreement, any abrogation of my rights is in direct conflict with the Good Friday Agreement. There's also wearing the T-shirt in England is wearing something of a prescribed organisation. Over here, 50% of the population wear T-shirts of the prescribed organisation. I must have 5 IRA T-shirts. How many people have UVF T-shirts, UFF T-shirts? So the prescription of terrorist organisations over here and showing support for them, it's like wearing a T-shirt, that is being applied to Palestine Action, but not IRA UVF. So you have these layers of human rights law that I can fall back on, that I'm being denied that's now being challenged through the court, that there's a denial of my right to free speech as an EU citizen, which someone in London isn't, as an Irish citizen, which someone in London isn't. So we have there. That is the complexity of the issue. So all my cautions, I'm quite aware, all my cautions and article. Now I was arrested under Article 13, but because of some of my speeches, I would also be Article 12 as well. But how they're going to apply the law here in the northern occupied part of Ireland is going to be totally different than what they're doing in England. But in England, it is because the government is pro-Israeli. Over here, you have the complexity of half the people in this country, north and south, are pro-Palestine, and the minority are pro-Israel. So that's that's the situation, if you can untangle that mess.
I can, thank you very much, because I attended Phoenix Law last night. They were in the Sunflower Club and they gave an update on how to protect your rights and how to interact or not interact with the police. They talked about Article 11, which is what you're maybe touching on there, and they went through the whole recourse of the law, and we talked about many different aspects of activism. But it's just, in my own personal opinion, the police, the PPS and the judiciary have a lot of leeway, which isn't necessarily a good thing. So they can decide whether or not you're breaking the law. So someone wearing a t-shirt that they may or may not agree with, they might decide that they're not going to prosecute them, arrest them, or caution them. And it's the same with the PPS. So I believe this is all politically driven, and that all these attacks upon people who are trying to just, raise awareness and bring an end to the genocide. I see, the Filton 18 and I see Palestine Action as people who are in full conversance with the Fourth Geneva Convention, which calls upon countries, organizations and individuals to prevent a genocide. And I personally believe that's what these groups are trying to do, and that this is a political persecution which is being carried out on behalf of the Zionist state in order to nullify public opinion and public dissent against their genocidal actions in Gaza. So look, that's all fantastic what you were saying. I think you should write a book about your daddy if you haven't already, because his life story, and including your mummy and including yours and maybe other members of your family, I think that would be a fantastic, valuable asset for people, to see our combined histories between Ireland and Palestine. So I'm just going to wrap up here, and in a wee second I'm going to ask people to subscribe and share this podcast. What would you like to say in conclusion to people who are watching this, people who are maybe thinking, I'm not going to get involved in direct action, I'm not really going to put my head above the parapet because look at what's happening to people who do, and without encouraging anything that would get other people into difficulties, what would you say to people, even the people who say, I don't have time to go to a march, I don't have time to have the luxury to become informed the way hopefully we have over the years, research, reading, watching podcasts, documentaries, films. We've all kind of educated ourselves as to what's happening because the mainstream media is not doing that. They're propaganda, they're distortions of the truth, they're lies. What would you say to people who go, it's halfway around the world, I don't have time, I'm bringing up my kids, it's not really anything to do with me? What would you say to those people?
No, I've heard people saying that, but I would say whenever there was a Holocaust against the communists and the Jews in Nazi Germany, what would you have done? You know what happened? You know what happens if people don't speak out? And if you don't want to speak out, that's okay. Bobby Sands said everyone has their part, no matter how small, to play. If you don't want to do anything, boycott Israeli goods. If you want to do more, but don't close your eyes and close your ears to what's happening in the world, because that is how evil thrives. That is how sadness, that is how brutality, everything, because nobody said. It's like the bully in the schoolyard. If the bully in the schoolyard hits somebody and you walk away and say, not my fight, then you're just as guilty. They're the bullies in the schoolyard, and all you need is the other kids to say, you're not doing that. Leave that person alone. Israel and America are the bullies in the world schoolyard, and you can either walk away and see a nation getting pummeled the same way a child can walk away and see another child getting pummeled, or you can stand up and say no. Don't let Israel and America be the bullies in the world schoolyard. Speak out, or do as little if you feel you can only do little, more if you think you can do more. But don't close your eyes, don't close your mind, and don't put your hands over your ears. You can change. Every single person can make that little change, and every part of it's just another brick in the wall, really.
Yeah, the thought that came into my mind there was, be the change you want to see in the world. I'm just going to maybe finish off with just what you were saying about bullies and things. I mean, that includes Britain, obviously. That includes intelligence agencies that are causing so much destabilization around the world. That includes NATO and the EU. I saw a very horrific video online of, I think, a young Syrian national, a young boy, about 14, being brutally beaten by two Irish thugs who looked to be 1 or 2 years older than him, recorded this, repeatedly punched him, took their tops off, took their shirts off, acting with that machismo and bravado, and beat that young man quite horrifically. So fascism, which is what I see is at the heart of Zionism, the dehumanization of the other so that you can kill men, women, and children without any remorse whatsoever. We're seeing the rise of fascism in Ireland and across Europe. It's my personal opinion that a lot of these groups are being financed potentially by pro Zionist individuals or organizations, because it's the immigrants, it's the refugees, it's the asylum seekers that they're attacking. So I think it's important to bring that into the discussion around Palestine and the complicity of the EU and others in what's happening. Maura, lovely to speak to you.
Yep.
Genuinely mean that. And
It's
well,
very, that what you're saying is very, very scary, because we see the rise of loyalists and they're doing this anti-immigration, and now you've got these pink ladies and all this immigration. At the end of the day, loyalism links itself to Israel, links itself to anti-immigration, because loyalism has always been to the far right. And this gathering of loyalism, they're linking it to the Palestinian struggle, and the Palestinian struggle stands alone, but they're trying to make it, and it's scary that we have to make sure that we do not allow it to become a Catholic Protestant nationalist unionist, the way the forces that you're talking about are trying to bring it in the north of Ireland. I can see this quite clearly, that this is a strategy of, oh, that's Fenians against loyalists, that's nationalists, pro-Palestine, and Palestine is an issue that shouldn't be linked to the conflict in Ireland. But the gathering storm of loyalism, or the gathering, where I don't know how strong it is or how weak it is, I'm not sure, but I can see loyalists linking to immigration, to Palestine, to anti-Islam. All of it is all being linked together, and then it's attack on its nationalists against loyalists, and now loyalists are pulling nationalists into it by saying that the Irish people are being threatened by immigration. It's very, very scary times to keep the correct focus where you should be keeping it.
No, I agree. I've been very disappointed by people who call and claim to be Republicans, that they are now part of this fascist cabal. The only caveat I would have is loyalism is our own colonial footprint. It's the British colonial footprint in the north of Ireland. So they see parallels with Palestine and Israel, because Israel is another right wing, it is another colonial British inspired footprint in the Levant, whereas Ulster Unionism and loyalism is the British fascist imprint in the north of Ireland. But we'll go here. So hopefully we'll get you on again for having the updates going forward. And thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Slán agus bannach. Chiefy me her rish la could jay base much.
Chiefy Mayhew, see you soon.
Slán.